Also, I'm pretty sure every kid raised in a first world country has a disturbing children's media moment that scarred them for life. Mufasa's death, Anakin's fiery doom, Ewoks in general. For me, one of the more concerning ones goes back to Mary Jane's death from Spider-Man the Animated Series.
She loves Peter Parker more than anything in the world.
Well, her water clone technically, where for multiple seasons we watched this relationship blossom from first encounter to marriage. And for a goofy cartoon that kept reusing the same shots of Spider-Man running through a shiny laboratory even when he's supposed to be inside a dumpy warehouse, it felt real. But what if I told you this form of long-term rewarding storytelling wasn't originally meant to be? The 80s and 90s were an incredibly cynical time after the Reagan administration effectively abolished all the regulations that prohibited marketing in kids media. Every bloody company wanted a piece of that commercial pie, where every program could be a gateway to a line of products.
Yeah, you know, that was the balance, was that the whole reason the show was on the air was to sell toys. Avi had gotten this license to do these shows from Marvel so that he could sell the toys. He had gotten the toy license.
Saban produced X-Men the Animated Series, and Marvel Films Animation produced Spider-Man the Animated Series. Although technically these two other companies did the animations. By the way, this was also during Marvel's bankruptcy too.
They were all very desperate to keep Marvel alive. I look back on it now and I go, you shouldn't have paid me money. You should have given me Marvel stock at 10 cents a share.
The production originally wanted Martin Pascoe, the story editor of Batman the Animated Series, to helm it, but negotiations failed. Therefore, Stan Lee brought in John Semper Jr., the hero of our story.
Not throwing shade on my predecessor, that's simply the fact that the show was a political mess behind the scenes. And so I said, well, okay, show me the written material that you've got so far. And they said, well, we can't because legally we're still settling up with that fellow. So I literally was starting from scratch. And the show had to get out the door very quickly now because all the time, the developmental time had been eaten up. So I mostly wrote the Bible for the show Bible, in about 2 weeks. There were two big decisions that were made before I got there. The first was that he was going to be college age, and the second was that they were going to do the Hobgoblin before the Green Goblin, which I thought was total insanity. And the reason that was because they had started to make the Hobgoblin toy. You know, the big figure and the small figure, and then there was the Hobgoblin glider.
He became the showrunner with a writing credit on every single episode, -5, and directed everything with a vision that this wouldn't just be a toy commercial as Avi Arad originally intended, but as a credible serial drama.
I said, I want to use this character, Madam Web. And he was not happy about that because he said, well, I can't make a toy out of an old broad.
Furthermore, the show was subject to some very strange censorship from the regulatory bodies. Like, no one, including Spider-Man, is allowed to punch anyone. No realistic weapons except for lasers. No one can talk about death nor show it, like when Daredevil said,
"My dad was never seen again."
My guess, he's still at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Carnage was just a lunatic, as opposed to a serial killer. Morbius could use his fangs to suck blood, so he sucks plasma from his suction cup hands. The Sinister Six was renamed into the Insidious Six, because apparently it sounded way less scary that way, even though the X-Men still had Mr. Sinister.
We navigated all these, but the other note I really like from here is, at one point in the fight with Hydro Man, Spider-Man is hurled to another rooftop where he lands on a pigeon coop and it smashes to bits. Page 14, Spider-Man should not appear to fall on any pigeons.
We got a BS&P note on the Daredevil episode. Does he have to have horns? Can't those be shown as small ears, perhaps?
Although John Semper did rebuke how extreme or how much effect these censors had, so I don't know.
We didn't get any more censorship than any other cartoon show on the air. So I want to, dispel that myth. These are the kinds of notes that everybody got in every script.
Either way, the crew truckered through in spite of all the bullshit and told a beautiful saga about life, love, choice, and free will. The show is 5 seasons, and apart from the first season, each are centered around different story arcs.
We have nobody. Except you, of course. You're always here for me. You're rock solid.
As a result, by having long-term narrative goals in mind, the show rarely had filler episodes or short-term payoffs. Season 1, there's 2 multi-episode arcs, Venom and Hobgoblin. The second season had the seasonal Neogenic Nightmare arc, and had loads of guest stars, famously Punisher, Blade, the X-Men, while also exerting more mundane pressures onto Peter Parker's life, from worrying about bills to relationship troubles.
I drop this and we all make the news
Sergey,
today.
let him go! My name is Dr. Mariah Crawford, and that creep creature down there is my friend.
Like Stan's original run, Spider-Man is a dude who's deeply involved in a crowded universe, because he's supposed to be a kid who belongs in two worlds. The ordinary one he originated from, and the super that he's heading towards, and the metaphor for growing up stems from how he doesn't belong to either. Yet, at least, for the reason that it's not until he lets go of his anger and impatience that his potential can be fully realized. In Season 2, this is illustrated with Peter Parker making his own mutational disease worse because he didn't listen to calmer voices. In Season 3, Sins of the Fathers, Peter Parker is forced to directly grow out of his immaturity as Madam Web comes in to prepare him for an inevitable conflict. Additionally, Peter Parker is framed by Kingpin, so he ends up working with the man himself, Daredevil.
Helpless as a beached whale.
And begins to date MJ before coming to blows with Green Goblin, who functions as a climax for his growth. This f***ing douchebag has been tormenting Peter Parker, including getting Mary Jane trapped in another dimension, so when he himself is about to fall, Spidey can let him go. In fact, he almost does. But he doesn't. Although, just like Defoe, Garby gets whacked by his own glider.
Tried to live up to the responsibility that comes with this great power. But when push came to shove, I failed the people who needed me most. The woman I love is gone.
Season 4 slows down. The sole narrative driver is now character as opposed to action, because Norman isn't replaced. Instead, Harry Osborn's Green Goblin is presented to be just a schmuck.
Your friend Osborn here is a few pumpkins short of a full pie.
Peter spends loads of time grieving alone, although he does learn to accept Black Cat as his partner.
She's definitely stirred up long-lost feelings in me.
Who does eventually leave him for Morbius. However, Mary Jane unexpectedly returns and renews his sense of purpose for the very end. In Season 5, we open with their wedding. Peter's happiest day ever.
I'll skip the for better or worse part, since we've been through that already.
And there's a whopping 4 story arcs for this time. There's the 6 Forgotten Warriors, which is a spy-centric adventure where Peter's search for his parents leads to a race for a doomsday device where Captain America returns. Then there's the return of Hydro Man, where it's revealed Peter's wife is a water clone. The original Miss Watson is still lost with Norman. As a result, Peter again loses her. Although he's not given a moment to grieve, as Madam Web's plans from Season 3 has finally come. There's a cosmic chess game between her and the Beyonder.
I'm not sure I understand it all myself, but here's what I know. There's this intergalactic entity named the Beyonder, and he wants to see who would win in a battle of good against evil.
A secret war, if you will. Spider-Man thus adopts a leadership role. As Carter argued in his paper, the comic incarnation has never progressed to the level of Earth's savior in the way that a character like Superman has. Secret War's arc is proof that this version of the character is a unique creation, a different and perhaps better Spider-Man. Although this isn't the end, in the 2-part finale, Spider-Man's ultimate battle is with himself, the Spider Carnage, whose self-loathing is so poisonous that he plans to destroy every universe. A man whose trauma has made him orientated backwards, unable to imagine anything outside of the wounds of his mind.
And you are me. I'm more you than you'd ever admit.
Carter further argued, this Spider Carnage is the dark version of Spider-Man, a character who dwells on his problems rather than overcoming them. He represents all of the weakness in the Spider-Man character that Spider-Man the Anime Series has been slowly eliminating over the course of 5 seasons. Much like the symbiote itself, Spider-Man the Anime Series depicted self-doubt, anger, and jealousy as parasites, which left unchecked would have consumed Spider-Man.
There's an evil inside you. It's your responsibility to the world and to yourself to expel it.
I've thought that I never got any breaks. But now, after all I've been through, for once, I like my life. I like myself. And for the first time ever, I wouldn't want to change anything about me.
Gee, you're definitely not the same guy I've been writing about all these years.
Well, Stan, we all have to grow up sometime, I suppose. Even us, characters of fiction.
Stanley was correct. The Spider-Man of Spider-Man the Anime Series was not the same one he'd written about, nor was he the same one that could be found in contemporary Spider-Man comics. He was more mature, more refined version of Spider-Man. The same character, but one that had different experiences, and most importantly, different reactions to those experiences than his comic counterpart. That was the last quote I promised. As a result, I'd argue the overall creative approach of the show is a lot like MCU Spider-Man in terms of refining and synthesizing decades of arcs and motifs into a more cohesive journey that could ultimately fulfill the promise set by Stan's original run, where Peter Parker is a mundane kid who has a place among the greats. But to be there, he has to stop being his own enemy. And the irony of both is that to spin a tighter biographical web for Spider-Man, they had to reinterpret him, so his reactions and attitude can mature beyond the misery that he often gets stereotyped for. The show's 65-episode run had amazing ratings, but Avi Arad, being the genius he is, got it cancelled by, I'm not shitting you, antagonizing the head of Fox Kids, Margaret Loesch, so much that she had enough of him and cancelled it. Apparently this was due to Saban wanting to produce their own Spider-Man show, hence Spider-Man Unlimited afterwards. And when I say unlimited, I mean very limited, because it was cancelled. Thus, the ideas for Season 6 were never realised, and we never see Peter Parker and MJ reunite fully.
We are going to find the real Mary Jane Watson. What?
However, when Semper launched a crowdfund campaign for a project called War of the Rocket Men, he did give out his version of Peter finding Mary Jane that you can totally buy on Amazon for £236. What? I'm not going to read the whole thing out of respect, and I don't think anyone needs to hear my bloody primary school level voice acting, but the general broad strokes are, in the pre-opening teasers, Spider-Man and Madam Web travel to find MJ, but are interrupted by some vortex electricity stuff. They crash. Web fades away, leaving Spider-Man all alone. This was later adapted into a video with the original voice actors, by the way. In Act 1, Spider-Man realizes he's in 1865 London. Jack the Ripper's around, but is revealed to be Carnage from the present day. After a battle, Spidey's web shooters are broken and he's mistaken to be the Ripper himself. MJ drops from another vortex with amnesia and is helped by two real-life Jack the Ripper victims, Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. Furthermore, this dimension's JJ and Flash arrive to get the big scoop. Spider-Man finds and attacks Green Goblin before discovering Mysterio too. In Act 2, he realizes they aren't from his dimension, but are just two dudes running a circus. Mysterio's Carnival of Mysteries and Illusions. They help Peter Parker in exchange for some good publicity. Subsequently, to fix the web shooters, they get parts from, guess who? H.G. Wells. What the f? Peter Parker discovers his time machine must have disrupted Madam Web's powers, so gets him to turn it off. And Wells helps Peter fix Madam Web's damaged chair, which Spider-Man had put a tracer on. Then, the gang enlists Sherlock Holmes. Again, very, very strange, who directs Peter Parker to Whitechapel, where Mary Jane must be. Her memories begins to come back as she bumps into 1865 Flash, and when she sees Carnage after he murders her friends. Spider-Man intervenes and reveals his secret identity to MJ. They kiss. Finally they're together. But Carnage runs off with her. In Act 3, Mysterio attacks Carnage. Jameson, being an American in Britain, angrily shoots his gun with a desire to end the murders, but ends up getting Beck's arm. So Holmes disarms him. Spider-Man deduces Carnage must have brought MJ to the Tower Bridge to reenact her last moments. They fight, and MJ is saved by Green Goblin. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? Spider-Man then lures Carnage to Big Ben to ring the bell. Cletus loses his symbiote and leaps to his death, seemingly. Peter had photographed much of this event and gives Beck and Harry the photographs to promote their circus. Although just before they leave, Carnage returns, takes MJ again, and plans to rampage across dimensions with Madam Web's chair. However, her safeguard tears him apart and sends him into limbo. She returns too, taking MJ and Peter Parker home. Although where Mary Jane leaves, Peter Parker is taken to no place, where windows to other dimensions are. Miles, Spider-Gwen, and Spider-Lady are seen. Webb reminds Peter Parker the importance of being Spider-Man. So when he leaves, he reaffirms his role to Bruce the Gargoyle. Peter finds Mary Jane is a bit balmy, but I think it's kind of cute. Personally, I still prefer the cliffhanger, because as much as it's very bittersweet, I do really like how optimistic it is. We know Peter Parker and MJ will reunite, and we have the authority to imagine it.
And I think you are finally entitled to some happiness.
Amen to that.
It's a great feeling. It didn't make me misanthropic like Spectacular Spider-Man's cliffhanger.
Was there something you wanted to tell me?
It was nothing.
Anyways, this was my Spider-Man 90s video. People can stop asking me now, and special thanks to everyone on Patreon. This video was a pain in the ass to make, so if it weren't for you guys, I literally wouldn't have made it.
I'm so confused right now, baby. Didn't work for us, didn't work for us. And I guess it's over now, baby. Didn't work for us,
what is now the Marvel Universe started on our show. Because I remember writing a Nick Fury outline, and then it got taken off my desk, and the next thing I knew, there was a Nick Fury TV movie being made with, you know, the whole business of Blade being half vampire, half human, that started with me and the cartoon show, our Spider-Man show, and then it became part of the movie, which was being developed at that same time by David Goyer. So it's all kind of muddled.
I'm gonna find a home for this.
Peter, where have you been?
Out jogging.
Wearing a blanket?